Hi, everybody. My name is Peggy, and I am a compulsive overeater. And I weigh and measure 3 meals a day off the gray sheet, and I commit those meals to my sponsor. I don't eat in between, no matter what. And abstinence is the most important thing in my life without exception. And one day at a time, I put this program first. Anything I put before it, I will lose. And I know that from experience. And I am here to build a defense against the first compulsive bite. Not the second, not the third, not the fourth. They don't matter. It's the first compulsive bite that will kill me. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this meeting. I have been on this meeting once or twice in the past. But I normally don't remember, and I know it's a great meeting. And I wanted to congratulate all of the people who are counting days. It's just fantastic. And let me just start by saying I am a hopeless case when it comes to this disease. I am utterly and completely hopeless. And so my opening statement is, if I can get abstinent and stop eating compulsively, anyone can do it. Absolutely anyone, because I retain the lack of humility and the alcoholic disease of grandiosity to firmly believe I am the sickest compulsive eater that has ever walked this earth. And that is the one thing I've never suffered from at a gray sheet meeting, which is, oh God, this is too extreme for me. No, I'm not that bad. No, my problem is always, gee, are they sick enough for me? So I can tell you, and because it's a newcomers meeting, although it doesn't sound like there's any real newcomers, but I should be able to give just the fact, if I didn't say another word, the fact that on December 28th of this year, last year, 2022, I celebrated 33 years of back-to-back gray sheet abstinence. And if I told you I had celebrated 33 minutes of gray sheet abstinence, it would still be a miracle, and let alone 33 years. And that, if I stopped right there, should give anybody hope that if that is possible, it's possible for you too. If you're new, or if you're relatively new, since I was told this was a newcomer orientation, I was thinking, what is it that a newcomer-ish person would be particularly notice about gray sheet? Because I presume that there's not a living soul who comes to gray sheet who hasn't tried other programs. Almost everybody has tried a lot of other programs. And speaking for myself, when I first came into gray sheet 45 years ago, and my story includes a big relapse, which is why I say anything I put before my program, I will lose. And I know that from experience. I had tried everything out there that I was aware of, including a psychiatric hospitalization, and everything from, therapists who told me to wear rubber bands on my wrist every time I had a food thought, to snap the rubber band, like that was really going to work against this disease. So I had done everything except surgery. And back then, surgery was it wasn't very commonly done, or believe me, I would have done it. So the first thing that people would notice coming into gray sheet is that we sound nuts, certifiably nuts. And what I mean by that is we sound to most people extreme. And the first aspect that comes across as extreme is the mantra, because you notice that everybody starts by saying the same thing. And most people's initial response is, holy cow, I walked into a cult. They're all saying this, like robots. What are they, Stepford wives? I mean, there's this kind of initial reaction. And then the next thing, it's bad enough that everybody says the same thing, but just as bad is what they're saying. They say, that they don't eat no matter what, which apparently means no exceptions, including restaurants and weddings and bar mitzvahs. Holy cow, that's crazy. And then I think the thing that probably freaks out most people more than anything else about the mantra, what we said, the content of the mantra is abstinence is the most important thing in my life without exception. Because for most people who think of themselves who are good human beings, they have relationships in life. They have parents, they have children, they have lovers, they have partners, they have church, they have whatever. And most people sincerely believe that if confronted between my abstinence and, saving my kid's life or something extreme, obviously abstinence can't be. My child is the most important thing in my life. My God is the most important thing in my life. That's what I want to address is the extremity that comes across and how it is that degree of seeming over the top commitment to what most people perceive as a diet, after all, how it is that makes sense. So let's look at it this way. It's a solution to a problem. The question is, does the solution match the problem? So one thing that I think most of us, if you have anything like the history that I have with compulsive eating, have had the experience of, is that the other programs that we've gone to, the other methods of trying to control this, really don't match the degree of the problem. And usually the reason why the extremity of the solution sounds so compulsively nuts is because we don't think in those terms. We don't think in terms of the fact that a solution, that a solution has to be equivalent to a problem. And we forget that, right? Or at least I did when I first came in. So let me just say something about the problem. This is a problem of addiction. Addiction is something that hijacks the brain. It's a complete colonialization of my neural systems, my neural processes. I am not like a normal person when it comes to food. And most normal people, if they eat a big, rich dessert, they eat it and they go, oh my God, I can't breathe. I'm done. I ate a big, rich dessert, and it was like gasoline poured on the fire. It opened up my apostat, which on most people sort of closes down when they get full. My apostat never functioned in the first place. I had no appetite regulator. Instead, I have this thing that just sets off a flame, a fire, a compulsion. And it's like a locomotive that suddenly is going downhill and the brakes are broken. And it takes off. And what happens is nothing could stop me from getting food. The craving was so all-powerful. It was a command. It was a gun to my head. I had no choice. And to live in a world as a human being, as a free agent without choice, completely negates the very fact of being a free agent. I was no longer a free human being. I was completely enslaved by this addiction. And I would go to any lengths to get food. That's called getting the food no matter what. So the second thing that would happen is I would somehow get the food, eat the food, and then what the scientists call adverse consequences, which is a really euphemistic way of saying that I felt like I was going to die and my life would fall apart and I couldn't function and I was obese at I weighed, the last time I was on a scale, I was about 270 pounds. Now I weigh about 115 pounds. So I'm a fraction of what I used to be. So that's an adverse consequence, being so obese that I lived in shame and horror, and I couldn't get dressed in the morning, and I couldn't take a shower because it hurt my skin so much, and I couldn't put clothes on, and because nothing was big enough. I could only wear bedspreads with holes in them. Very fashionable, to be sure, in the 60s and 70s, but nonetheless, not so much today. So the adverse consequences is part of the disease, that didn't stop me. So that's part of addiction. It's first that it hijacks the brain, it drives me to do whatever I want, and then it creates consequences so terrible that any normal person would never go near that behavior again, like putting your hand on a hot stove. But I'm like, oh, I'll never do it again. Never, ever, ever. I throw everything out. Things go in the dumpster. Soap goes on it, down the garbage disposal. And next thing you know it, I'm outside at the dumpster with an umbrella with a hook for, on the handle, reaching in, trying to grab bags that I had thrown out the night before. Thank you. So abstinence is the most important thing in my life without exception. The extremity no longer looks so, the saying no longer looks so extreme, does it? At least not to me, because nothing was more important to me than getting food. When I found Grey Sheet, I was in graduate school, and I had worked my butt off to get into graduate school, and I was on the verge of getting kicked out. My fantasy of my life's career was going down the drain. I couldn't function. I was sick to my stomach all the time. Couldn't write any papers. I had all incompletes. I couldn't take my exams. They were basically telling me, you're going to get kicked out. I obviously couldn't have relationships. It was all about hiding from people. And if you could just tell me 1 minute, Nancy, so I don't completely blow this. The invert, I was making food. I mean, I wasn't. The addiction was putting food, the most important thing in my life. If I don't put abstinence, the most important thing in my life, I don't have a relationship with anybody. I don't have a relationship with God. I don't have a relationship with, certainly not with family, certainly not children, lovers, partners, let alone friends. For jobs, career, professionalism, how could I have a profession if I couldn't get dressed in the morning or take a shower because it hurt me too much? I had to take showers with the lights off because I couldn't bear to see my body. It was so horrific to me. So everybody has flown, and everybody knows that when they say the oxygen tube comes down first, they say, if the oxygen tube comes down first and you're traveling with a small child, you put it over your face first. And everybody has that initial, even if you're not traveling with a small child, you go, wow, that's weird. That sounds so counterintuitive. I mean, of course I want to save my child first. And it takes a minute or two or a lifetime to understand that my child's life has no hope if I'm not saved myself. So if I don't put abstinence first, then there is no possibility for anything else. And that then goes to the second thing, which is the no matter what, which is that if I have a disease, thank you. If I have a disease this extreme, it doesn't go to sleep and just kind of check out when I go to a restaurant. Instead, when I go to a restaurant, and if I were to try to eat without weighing and measuring my food, in other words, without surrendering to a higher power, my scale has to be my first and most devoted higher power. Anybody who loves God, that's fine. But God doesn't weigh and measure for you. Your scale does. As profane as that may come across to you, I'm sorry, that's where it starts, with the scale. You build a spirituality from that acceptance of that degree of powerlessness. And finally, last point about the mantra itself. I can't do this alone. This is a we program. And the way that I know how to turn, who I can turn to for help is I have to know that you're as sick as me, A, and B, that you've found the same solution as me, because I can't get any help from people who don't do Grey Sheet, because we do an extreme program. The mantra is a tribal signal. It's a language. It's a way of saying, I'm like you. You can count on me. And when I hear you say the mantra, then I know I can go to you and say, how do I not do this deadly drug for one day? So thank you for letting me share, and I appreciate it. And I could never do it without all of you.